Hi, welcome to this technical overview on IBM Spectrum Protect version 8.15 and IBM Spectrum Protect Plus version 10.1.1. I'll be going over the Spectrum Protect items on the left-hand side, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Sean Sperry, to cover the Spectrum Protect Plus 10.1.1 items on the right-hand side. The first new enhancement is the ability to detect ransomware and be alerted on it. If you go into the Operations Center and go into Overviews and Security, you'll see this new feature. And what it does is that after every backup of a client, and this is just the Spectrum Protect Backup Archive client backups, not archives, not TDPs, not HSM, we will analyze the backup statistics. And if we find that the current backup is 25% or greater increase in the amount of data being backed up compared to the last 5 backups, or if there's been a 25% or greater decrease in the deduplication rate for data going to container storage pools compared to the last 5 backups, we will issue a notification warning the Spectrum Protect admin that there might have been some type of ransomware on that end user's machine. The reason for that is when ransomware attacks a machine, usually it will go through and encrypt all of the files. So the next time Spectrum Protect goes to do a progressive incremental backup against those files, it sees them as a new version of the file because they've changed. So we do the backup against them. And the dedupe ratio is going to go down drastically because encrypted files do not dedupe well at all. So if either of these criteria are met, we do display a warning message in the new security notification page. We will also pop up a notification bar in the Operations Center, regardless of what screen the admin might be on, if they are logged on when this notification occurs. And finally, we will log an ANR 3692W to the activity log. The Spectrum Protect admin then has a couple of options they can do. They can view the notifications in the Operations Center, and that'll include a 2-week graph. They can mark that as acknowledged. They can assign that notification to a particular admin. They can reset the baseline for that backup and dedupe if they see that that was not a ransomware attack and that this baseline should be utilized. And finally, they can simply manage the alerts inside the Operations Center Overviews Alerts section. I do have a YouTube out there on this. If you want to see a demo of it, please do take a look at that. Okay, let's take a look at some of the details. First of all, when you go into the Operations Center, the name of the machine that the notification occurred against, the timestamp, and then if it is a dedupe decrease, you'll see this little 3 dots with an arrow and a single dot. If you select the notification, on the right side, you would see a graph showing when those notifications occurred. You would see the deduplication rate that was achieved, in this case 25%, versus the average of the last 5 backups, which was 82%. So as you can see, that's a massive decrease in our dedupe ratio. For a workload increase, you would see these 1s and 0s showing up next to the notification. If you select that notification on the right-hand side, you would get the graph. You would get the information about the amount of data that was backed up versus the average for the last 5 times. Now, it is possible that you'll get both the dedupe decrease and the workload increase, so you could have 2 icons in the symptom field. And if that was the case, then you would get 2 graphs on the right-hand side. The administrator has 3 different actions they can take. The administrator, first of all, has to at least have alert management privileges. If they click on the Acknowledge button, then that'll add a visual checkbox next to the notification, just saying that the administrator has taken a look at this and it's been seen by them. It doesn't delete it, it doesn't do any changes to it, it just acknowledges that they've looked at it. If they click the green Reset button, then this will delete the row from the table and it'll start a new average baseline to compare future backups and dedupe ratios against. And you would see this warning. If you click on Assign, you can then select one of the Spectrum Protect administrators to assign this notification to, and perhaps that admin would then go and take a deeper look into it. When you assign it, it does not send an email or anything like that to the administrator. It just visually places their name in the Assign column so you know who's looking into that possible ransomware attack. If an admin is logged on to the Operations Center when this notification is generated, they will get a pop-up like this pink line right here. and that'll show up no matter where they're at in the Operations Center, and they can simply close it out. There's an X on the far right-hand side of that. The ACK log does register the ANR 3692W message, and you can set up a Spectrum Protect alert so that you would send an alert to the Spectrum Protect alerting section and possibly an email out to a specific administrator. The next big enhancement in 815 is Cloud Pool Reclamation. What this allows you to do is reclaim space in your cloud container storage pools, whether they're on-premise or off-premise. And so this is a way to reduce the amount of storage occupied by Spectrum Protect on the cloud. And what you'll see is that over time, as Spectrum Protect writes to the cloud, it will write out the data in an immutable fashion. But over time, expiration will occur, the dedupe extents will be expired if they're no longer referenced by any of the Spectrum Protect server objects. But those containers will still contain that dead space because they are immutable and we can't overwrite them. So we now have a new storage rule type of reclaim, and this allows a process to run daily at a given time to reclaim space from the cloud. Now, it is applicable to both on-prem and off-prem clouds of type S3 or Azure. And so when we do this reclamation, we're going to move the data extents that meet the reclamation requirements from a larger fragmented cloud container into a smaller, leaner container with less unused space. You can set this storage rule type reclaim up automatically inside of the Operations Center if you go to Storage, Storage Pools, Details, Rules. And when you do that, you're going to be asked for a rule name, the time of day that you want to start that reclamation at, and it should be done after you've done your backups and any tiering out to the cloud. You can then choose the reclaimed storage after which percentage, and whenever you set this percentage and click Calculate, it will change the estimates on the right-hand side here. You can also turn this from active to inactive in case you only want to run this manually. If you want to just run it manually, you would leave it as inactive until you want to kick it off, and then you would set it to active. I do have a YouTube out there, so you can take a look at a demo of that if you want to see how that looks in real time. Okay, so when we go into the Operations Center, you're going into the Operations Center, Storage, Storage Pools, Details, Rules. You're going to enter the rule name, the daily start time, how long you want it to run, and the percentage reclaimable space. It's important when you get your original estimate for the reclaimable space that you run some calculations to see if this actually makes sense. Because what we want to happen is that the savings per month, which can be calculated as the cost per gigabyte that your cloud provider charges you, times the gigabytes saved, is going to be more than the cost to perform a reclamation. When we do the reclamation, remember, we're having to read the existing data and then write it out to a new container. So you are going to have gets and puts as well as network traffic going over to the cloud. And so depending upon your cloud provider, you will be charged at different rates for these functions. So you will need to figure out your cost to perform the reclamation by taking the cost per get times the gets requested, and you can see that over here in the estimated value, where you would have 4 get requests and 2 put requests. Cost per put times the put request, cost per gigabyte received times the gigabytes received, and the cost per gigabyte sent times the gigabyte sent. Obviously, if this is an on-premise cloud, this number becomes kind of irrelevant, but if it is an off-premise cloud provided by a third party, you definitely want to pay attention to the cost you'll incur by running this reclamation. If those numbers don't make sense, you can always change your reclaimed storage pool number here and recalculate it and see if that new percent reclaimable if it makes the savings per month greater than your cost to perform reclamation. You can also set up manually this defined storage rule, and that would be defined storage rule action type equals reclaim. Likewise, you can do an update storage rule or delete storage rule using your command line. When you look at a storage pool before reclamation, if you did a query storage pool format equals detailed, you would see, for instance, the cloud space allocated and the cloud space utilized. Here we see the reclamation starting with our processes kicking off. During the actual reclamation, if you do a query process, you'll see the reclaim containers process. And basically here is your parent process that's queuing up the eligible containers for reclamation, and that's tracking the combined progress of the worker processes that are performing the reclamation. Below it, you'll see the actual worker processes, and you're going to have one for each eligible container that's queued up by the parent process. And that'll be up to the maximum processes defined in that storage rule you set up. So we will be running move datas from the containers one at a time to the new containers, and we'll keep track of their cumulative progress. And the values will update only after a full container has been reclaimed. At the end of reclamation, you will see the process completing. And if you do a query storage pool at this time, you'll see now the cloud space allocated is 74 bytes with the cloud space utilized as 47 compared to the original one of the allocated of 92. If you go into the Operations Center and were to compare your before and after numbers, on the left-hand side, you can see the estimated amount of space that would be saved. That's 18.5 megabytes. And the new space would be 74.2. So if I go over and I look at the after stats, I can see the 74.2. Now do notice that there's still some unused space out there. And that space can be reclaimed in the future if the containers that they reside in have a high enough percentage of unused space to qualify for reclamation. Remember, out in your cloud, you're going to have multiple containers, and each container might not have high enough percentage unused space to qualify for reclamation at that particular time. Now, obviously, if you did adjust your percent reclaimable, if you made that higher or lower, that would also impact your final estimated amount of unused space. Okay, another updated process we have is an auto audit of a directory container storage pool. Audit container was originally introduced in version 7.1.3, and at that point the audit container checked for inconsistencies between the database and the cloud or directory storage pools. In version 8.1.5, we can now schedule that audit container process to run for a directory container pool. And what it'll do is if you schedule it, it'll actually dynamically adjust its footprint based on the intensity and ongoing activities in your Spectrum Protect server. And this way you'll have a lower impact on the higher priorities like data ingest or replication, because we will be adjusting underneath the covers this audit process when higher priority processes come in. In order to schedule this, you will do either a define or an update storage rule command. And you will want the delays to be the number of days between your starts. We recommend this to be like 7 days, so running once a week. If you're running it daily, that might be a little bit of overkill on the Spectrum Protect server. If you do set your audit level to 5, that is equivalent to the audit container action equals scan all, versus if you go to a lower level, it won't be doing as detailed of a check. The reason you would use the define storage rule versus a define admin schedule is a defined storage rule will dynamically adjust as it sees different processes coming in versus your admin schedule, which would not automatically adjust the priority of the audits. On slide 17, this is what your query process will look like if you are running an audit container. The way to kill an audit container is obviously with a cancel process that will cancel that out. Okay, slide 18. Directory container defrag was originally introduced in version 7.1.3, and it would run under the covers whenever you issued a move container. What we saw in version 7.1.3 is that when we create containers, we were creating a set of containers that held deduped data and another set of containers that held non-dedupe data. For instance, metadata, data that was too small to dedupe, or data that wouldn't dedupe because maybe it had been encrypted or compressed prior to being sent to the directory container. And so we had these two sets of containers out there. Well, if you had a major change in the amount of dedupe-centric versus non-dedupe-centric workload, for instance, if you started backing up data that had been encrypted and you had a large uptick of that type of data that was going into the non-deduped containers, you would see that you were getting an out-of-space condition on the directory container storage pool. Yet if you went and looked out there, there was still space available. And what was happening is that, for instance, we were using up all of the space that was allocated to the non-dedupe containers. And so even though there was space left in the dedupe container section, we weren't able to balance those two spaces. Starting in version 8.1.4, we introduced the ability to do move container defrag equals yes as an option. And then what we're introducing in 8.1.5 is, in addition to this new move container defrag equals yes, we can now automatically rebalance the percentage of dedupe versus non-dedupe containers that exist inside of a container storage pool. And so this will get rid of the problem where you had space still available in, for instance, the dedupe section, but we're out of space in the non-dedupe containers. On slide 19, Spectrum Protect can help manage your storage environment to support GDPR compliance strategies. As a lot of you will know, General Data Protection Regulations, known as GDPR, are designed to harmonize data privacy requirements across the EU, and these are becoming effective on May 25th of 2018. Now, GDPR itself is a statement about business and its processes. It's not a statement about products. As a product, Spectrum Protect cannot say our product is GDPR compliant or that our product will make you GDPR compliant. But what we can deliver is functionality to help address the GDPR requirements. And so let me give you a couple examples of those. We have existing functions like transport layer security, which enables secure communications of data. We have client and server-side encryption already available. And both of these will help you comply with Article 32 of the GDPR, which is security of processing. In version 8.1.5, we have added a new update file space report deletes equals volumes. And this will enable the user to track deletions and restorations at volume, file space, and individual object layer. So if you combine that with our existing support for delete objects, as well as our ability with Incremental Forever to granularly track the data in our Spectrum Protect database, and so that if you do need to delete a specific version, we can do that. Whereas other products that use either a full plus differential or a grandfather-father-son type of scheme, for them it's impossible to remove individual versions of files. So Spectrum Protect is well situated to address the GDPR Article 17, which is your right to erasure or right to be forgotten. We do have a compliance strategy tech note out there, so do take a look at that if you want some more examples of how Spectrum Protect can help you address GDPR compliance strategies. The next enhancement is around our generate deduplication statistics. In version 7.1.3, we introduced the ad hoc command generate dedupe stats, which generates dedupe statistics on an ad hoc basis. In 8.1.5, you can now schedule that to run regularly using the defined storage rule command. And with this, you can have it run at the same time each day or at a specified interval. So the new command is going to be defined storage rule with action type equals gen dedupe stats. In addition, we have a new description field which allows the users to specify a description for the storage rule, which they can then use when they do the query dedupe stats and utilize the filtering option. Do know that when you run generate dedupe stats, it can be I/O intensive on your Spectrum Protect server, so it should be run at a time when not much is going on in the Spectrum Protect server. Likewise, the query dedupe stats has been updated, so now it has a description field where you can specify a specific description you want to query on, and it has a summary format which will give you the statistics for a specified set of nodes, node groups, and file spaces. And in addition, the user can specify a combination of nodes, file spaces, or report IDs to generate a summary report for a subset of statistics with a certain report ID. So here you can see two different examples, one where we do a query dedupe stats dir test with a wildcard $, format equals detailed, and we get back this information, versus a query dedupe stats with a format equals summary. And in this case, you'll get the summary for this specific report ID. In version 8.15, we did add support for plinux LE Ubuntu support. It does not include any tape or VTL support for that. In 8.15, we've added LTO 8 support. We've also boosted our transaction processing for tapes. So prior to 8.15, if you were moving data from a volume that contained many small nodes or file spaces, we would commit a transaction and start a new one every time a new node or file system was encountered. Now in 8.15, we no longer are committing a transaction and starting a new one every time a new node or file system is encountered. And what this means is that more data is going to be packed into a transaction and fewer tape commits are going to be done. This will only help if you have a bunch of small file spaces or nodes. So it won't help with larger workloads, and this is because they're already committed on data limit basis. Operations Center users will now be asked to give feedback on Spectrum Protect. They'll see this provide feedback option 30 days after logging into the Operations Center for the first time, or the first time they're logging in at version 8.15 or above. 90 days after the initial dialog box is displayed, they will then get another opportunity to give feedback, and that'll continue every 90 days. Now, the feedback is being collected by Medallia, and it will provide the feedback to IBM, and IBM is going to use that to determine the trouble areas or areas that they're doing well in. The scale for the questions is going to go from 0 to 10, 0 not at all satisfied, 10 extremely satisfied. An example of some of the questions that are being asked is, how likely are you to recommend IBM Spectrum Protect to a colleague or business partner? Availability or uptime, functionality as relates to my business needs, support resources available, compatibility with other products, and ease of use. Just a note, we do have a new white paper out that talks about deploying a solution that combines IBM Spectrum Protect for space management with Spectrum Scale. So this will walk you through how to install and configure IBM Spectrum Protect for space management on the IBM Spectrum Scale clusters. With that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Sean Sperry, to cover Spectrum Protect Plus 10.1.1.
Hello, my name is Sean Sperry, and I am with the IBM Storage Group, and I will cover the new features of Spectrum Protect Plus version 10.1.1. This is a pretty large release for Spectrum Protect Plus, so let's go ahead and get started. The first enhancement for version 10.1.1 is an enhancement for Spectrum Protect Plus to allow you to protect the Spectrum Protect Plus infrastructure. And what that really amounts to is being able to replicate vSnap storage for disaster recovery purposes and providing an automated catalog backup of the Spectrum Protect Plus infrastructure. So in version 10.1.1, Spectrum Protect Plus allows asynchronous replication between vSnap repositories of the backups or of your Hyper-V or VMware infrastructure. So you can do this to have a built-in automatic off-site disaster recovery copy. The configuration for this, as you'll see in the slides coming up, is really easy. Basically, you set up a partnership between the vSnap storage, and then you set up the times that you're going to do the replication in the SLAs that are doing the backup, and the replication occurs on an automatic schedule. Now, of course, for disaster recovery purposes, you're also going to need to protect the Spectrum Protect Plus database. And so in version 10.1.1, you can protect the Spectrum Protect Plus catalog information with a backup to vSnap storage. And basically, again, this is very easy to set up and very easy to use. You just add this backup to the SLA or create a new SLA policy, and then on a schedule, it will automatically back up the catalog. So just some detailed steps on adding the vSnap replication. You add the vSnap server, so you create a vSnap server, and then you click on the configure tools icon for that server, click on the plus, and you define a vSnap partner from the configure storage partners menu. And that will create a partner for a particular vSnap storage repository. Now, just a quick note here, you can have multiple partnerships, so you can replicate a vSnap repository to multiple other vSnap sites. But in this demo, we just have, or just screenshot, we only have one partnership. And really, that's pretty much how simple it is to set up replication. Now, in order to schedule the replication, you go to your SLA's policy, you click on backup storage replication, and you enable backup storage replication. And you give it a frequency and a time for the replication to run, and the target site for the replication partner. And now you have vSnap backing up to a replication partner. Now, just a quick note, as you can see down at the bottom, you can have same or different replication policies. So by default, if that bottom checkbox is checked, you're going to have the same retention policy on the target as you do on the source. If, on the other hand, you want a different retention policy on the target, you can uncheck that and set the retention policy that you want on the target. Catalog backup, again, very easy to do. You go to System Catalog Backup, and you click the SLAs that you want the catalog backup to be a part of, and then you basically click Save. And really, that is all there is to it to do a catalog backup or catalog protection. Now, from a disaster recovery perspective, if you lose your primary vSnap appliance, you may have to do a catalog restore. And in that case, you will install the new Spectrum Protect Plus appliance and then scan in the vSnap that contains the catalog backup. And then you click System, Catalog, and Restore, and then click the vSnap repository containing the catalog backup. When you do that, you'll see a list of the catalog backups that are in the repository, and basically you just choose Restore from the checkbox on the right-hand side. So very easy to use, very easy to do. Now, just a note that the backup is a true backup and not a merge. So when you restore this catalog backup, you will be overwriting any existing configuration or catalog in the current Spectrum Protect Plus instance that you're logged into. In version 10.1.1, we've introduced a new concept of sites. This really allows you to more easily visualize the different locations of your Spectrum Protect Plus infrastructure. So it gives you the ability to see where backups are stored and to restore from the one that's closest to you, and to be able to replicate to sites that are very easily visualized as a different location. It's really pretty easy to set up the sites. You just go to System, Site, you click the plus button, and you type in a new site name, and you click Save. And then you have a new site where you can define vSnaps or VADP data movers, etc. So moving on to VADP proxies. As you probably know from version 10.1.0, Spectrum Protect Plus allows you to use VADP proxies to enable load sharing, and load balancing of backup jobs. And what those do is allow the processing load to be shifted off of the Spectrum Protect Plus appliance and onto those proxies that you create. Well, in previous versions of the product, or in version 10.1, you had to manually install those proxies. And a new enhancement in version 10.1.1 allows you to automatically install the VADP proxy components onto an existing server. There's a list of requirements at the bottom. I won't read them all to you, but basically you're going to stand up a SUSE Linux Enterprise server or a Red Hat server and give it the required RAM. And then once you do that, you'll be able to do and of course meet the other requirements for ports opened and things along those lines. And then you'll be able to do a push installation of the proxy software. You just log into the SPP portal and choose System VADP Proxy. You'll fill in the hostname IP, username, and credentials and click Install. And Spectrum Protect Plus will install all the VADP proxy software on the new virtual machine or physical machine that you set up to be used as a VADP proxy. In addition to doing the initial installation of the VADP proxy, we will also allow you to update proxies. So as we continue to push out new versions of Spectrum Protect Plus, you'll be able to go out and update the proxy version. What you have to do is stop processing on the proxy by doing a suspend on the proxy. And then you will go in there and basically look at the version column to see the current version of the VADP proxy. And if there's a different updated version available, you'll see the update icon next to the status column. And you will click the update icon. You'll fill in the credentials for root to access the VADP proxy. And you'll click update to update the software. Now, of course, having multiple proxies, you'll want to be able to use them and specify which ones you use for your data protection jobs. So in version 10.1.1, now that you have multiple proxy servers, you can specify which proxy to use for a backup job at the job level. And you go to Hypervisor VMware Backup. Select the resources that you want included in the backup job, which would be VMs, data stores, however way you want to select the virtual machines that are going to be included in this backup job. And then click the Select Options button. And here you can specify a VADP proxy, either by site, so by picking a whole site for the proxy, or by picking a specific proxy in your environment. Obviously, you're going to want to pick ones that are closest and connected by the fastest network to the VMs that you are including in the backup job. Okay, so the next new feature that we're going to get into is application protection for Spectrum Protect Plus version 10.1.1. In version 10.1.0, we did not support any applications in Spectrum Protect Plus. And beginning at version 10.1.1, we are going to start supporting the backup of Microsoft SQL Server and Oracle. So we're going to start off with a review of SQL Server. And what you'll find is as we get into Oracle, the process is very much the same, except it's Oracle as opposed to SQL Server. So first of all, the Spectrum Protect Plus supported versions. As of this recording, it's SQL Server 28 2012 on Windows Server 2012 R2, SQL 2012, 2014, and 2016 on Windows Server 2016. Again, these support matrices change on such a frequent basis that before you install, and if you're looking for support for a specific version of SQL Server, go out and look at the supported version list and make sure you have the latest information. And we do support both SQL Server on both physical and virtual machines. Now, there are some prerequisites and security that you'll have to set up. Windows Remote Shell must be enabled. The iSCSI Initiator service must be started. The user that you're logging in must have logon as a service rights on the SQL Server system. Inside SQL Server, the login credential must have public and sysadmin permission enabled and permission to access cluster resources in an always-on environment. To perform log backups on SQL Server, the SQL Server agent service must be a local Windows administrator and must have sysadmin permissions enabled to manage SQL Server agent jobs. And finally, the host name has to be resolvable for the SQL Server systems. Once you meet those prerequisites and set up the proper permissions, it's pretty easy to go in there and register the SQL Server servers and clusters. As you can see in version 10.1 on the left-hand side, we have a new portal entry called Application Backup, and you can choose SQL and Oracle. So for SQL Server, you choose Application SQL Backup, Manage Application Server, and then click the plus, and you'd enter a DNS name or an IP address and the user ID or password of the credentials that you're going to use to access the SQL Server, and click Save. Now, in version 10.1.1, we've added a new feature for both SQL, Oracle, and file system backups that allows you to test registered servers to make sure that you have the proper permissions. So when you have a SQL Server set up, Oracle, or just a virtual machine, and you want to test and make sure that all the connectivity is working and all the security is working, you can click on that test button in the actions menu or that test selection in the actions menu, and it will go out there and run a sequence of tests to make sure that all the connectivity is working with that virtual machine or that instance. So it's a very good thing to do to make sure that you can connect before the actual job is run, and you can solve any problems that may come up with security or connectivity issues. SQL Server, from an inventory perspective, kind of works just like virtual machines from a hypervisor perspective. What's going to happen is, as you register SQL servers, you're going to get an inventory job, which is called Default Application Server Inventory Job. And that job will run on a nightly basis to go out there and discover all of these SQL Server instances or SQL Server databases on each server and cluster that you have registered. Now, you can also, just like you can on a hypervisor, run this job on demand. So you just go to the job manager and click Action Start, and the inventory job will go out there and inventory the databases and instances. Now, as you already know from backing up virtual machines, Spectrum Protect Plus is an agentless application, but it does need to install some services that are used to manage the backups on either the VM on the VM, or for SQL Server or for Oracle. So here you can see a screenshot of the agents that it installs, and these are installed during the inventory process or updated during the inventory process. So as you can see, you have a Spectrum Protect Plus agent, Spectrum Protect Plus agent script, and Spectrum Protect Plus agent for SQL. So now the details of how SQL Server is backed up. Spectrum Protect Plus performs backups of SQL databases at the block level, and it's going to do an incremental forever backup of those SQL Server databases. So the first backup is going to be a full, and all the allocated blocks from the source database are transferred to the vSnap repository. Then after that first full, all the subsequent backups are going to be block level incrementals and transfer only the changed blocks. So what it does, the way it achieves this, is it queries the Windows Update sequence number or USN journal, change journal, to locate and back up the changed block. So it's almost the same technology, or probably is the same technology, to be honest with you, that's used with AAG log shipping. Each backup is going to keep track of the last USN ID, which is used by the next backup to query for change blocks. And of course, the backups are going to be SQL Server application consistent. Once it gets the blocks that it needs to back up, the backup of the SQL data is going to be done by creating an iSCSI mount from the vSnap volume to the SQL Server. And then a subfolder is going to be created for each database on the target volume. You can turn on and off log backup, and if you choose to turn on log backup, it's done by creating a CIFS volume on the vSnap server and mounting it to the SQL Server. The logs are copied to SQL Server transaction files, and each log backup generates one transaction file containing all the transactions from the last backup to the current time. And of course, we're going to go in and truncate the logs after the backup. From a GUI perspective, it's really very easy to set up. You create an appropriate SLA policy under SQL Backup, under Application SQL Backup, and you can either select individual databases or select the entire instance. So it pretty much works just like virtual machines, except now you're dealing with SQL Server databases and SQL Server instances. If a database is not supported, it won't be selectable. And you can also see that if your database is in full or bulk recovery mode, you'll also be able to back up the logs. You'll see an eligible for log backup is yes. Obviously, if it's in simple mode, then it will not show that there. And then next you apply the desired SLA and options. So that's backup. Now let's take a look at the process for doing a restore. And this again is very similar to virtual machines. You can restore databases in two modes, either test or production, and we're going to go over what each one of those means in an upcoming slide. You can of course pick the original location or an alternate location for restoring the database. You can pick the original name or a new name. Databases can be restored from the primary or replicated copy if that is configured. And then you can either have Spectrum Protect run recovery or just restore the database in no recovery mode and go into SQL Server and run recovery on the database. For those of you who've used SQL Server, you'll know you'll see the database in what's called the restoring state on the GUI, and then you can go in and recover it there, or you can recover it using transact SQL commands. Point-in-time recovery is supported for both test and production mode if you're doing log backups. So now the difference between test and production mode restores, and again, this very much mimics what goes on with virtual machines. For a test mode restore, the vSnap volume containing the database backup is cloned, and the clone volume is iSCSI mounted on the SQL Server. The database is brought up from the clone volume. As per usual, the database is always restored to standalone local instance, even if it is restored to an always-on availability group. And it doesn't join an always-on availability group. That's pretty standard for SQL Server. And then you can manually add the database to the primary instance if necessary, and then use SQL seeding script to add the secondary databases to the AAG. Now, the primary difference for test mode is, you'll note here that the database is not copied to the SQL Server machine. So a test mode restore is going to be very fast because there's no data movement involved and the database stays on vSnap. With a production mode restore, however, the vSnap volume containing the database backup is going to be cloned. The cloned volume is iSCSI mounted to the SQL Server, and then the database log files are going to be copied from the mounted volume to the SQL Server virtual machine or physical machine. Again, the database will be brought up. If it's restored to an always-on availability group, only the primary database is going to be added, so you're going to go out there and reseed the other members of the AAG. Secondary databases will be restored to the local instance in no recovery mode, which requires a log restore. There is a third option for doing SQL Server databases restored, and that is the so-called instant option access restore. And what this really does is provide access to the database and log files. So the vSnap volume is going to be cloned and mounted on the SQL Server. You can see the clone in disk management, and then you can go into SQL Server and attach to those backup files and run the database. Okay, so that was SQL Server, and what you're going to see is Oracle is in many ways very similar to SQL Server. Again, here we have a list of the Oracle databases that are supported, including 11G, 12CR1, and 12CR2, and the operating systems versions that are supported. But again, same recommendation with Oracle as with SQL Server. Look at the supported list and make sure your specific version is an operating system is on it before you start trying to back up. Same sort of information with prerequisites and permissions. The Oracle database must be mounted and open and must be in archive log mode to be protected with Spectrum Protect Plus. Of course, DNS name must be resolvable. You have to have Python version 2.6x or 2.7x, and SSH must be enabled. Now there are a couple of additional permissions here. The user agent must belong to the Oracle inventory group, and the user agent must have the following sudo privileges, which are required to discover storage layouts, mount and unmount the disks, and manage the databases. So I'll let you read the commands at the bottom of the, or read the permissions at the bottom of the screen there but those permissions are required in order to back up Oracle databases with SPP. Registering Oracle systems once you set up the permissions is very similar to SQL Server. You navigate to Application, Oracle, and Backup. You manage application servers and click the plus sign, and then add the host name or DNS name and the user ID with the proper privileges. Same test procedure, right? If you're concerned that the permissions are not right, run the test, make sure that everything, or even if you're not concerned that the permissions are not right, run the test to make sure that everything is in order before you start trying to perform a Oracle database backup. Just like with SQL Server and with virtual machines, there's a default application server inventory job. It's scheduled to run daily by default to pick up all the Oracle databases. You can run it at any time to pick up new Oracle databases if you don't want to wait for the daily run. So the details of Oracle database backups and how it works in the background. Again, same concept. Oracle backups are going to be run on a backup once, incremental forever scheme. And Oracle block change tracking is required. If it's not present on the Oracle database, it will be enabled automatically on the first backup. The first Oracle backup will be a full, and Spectrum Protect Plus will create a new vSnap volume and mount it to the Oracle server using NFS. If the Oracle server has NFS disabled, the SPP appliance will automatically enable it. And then a level 0 image copy of the database will be created using RMAN. Subsequent backups are incremental. So the previous created volume will be reused and mounted using NFS. And then Spectrum Protect Plus will do a level 1 incremental backup using RMAN, and immediately apply it on top of the previous image copy to bring it up to date. The database is not placed in hot backup mode. So this is something that is important to understand. Archive logs generated only during the data backup operation are backed up at the end of the operation. So we only take the minimum set of logs required to have a consistent database backup during the backup operation. Logs generated before the backup began are not included, so currently in version 10.1.1, point-in-time restore is not going to be supported with Oracle databases. We will also back up the control file in binary form, the control file trace in text form, and the database parameters in text form, or the P file of the database. You can view these databases, or the DBA can look in the RMAN catalog, in the local RMAN catalog, and can see these backups. And also a note for DBAs that syncing of this information to a remote recovery catalog is not performed automatically. If you're using Oracle RAC or in a RAC configuration, the backup is performed from any one node in the cluster where the DB is up and running. Creating the database backup from the GUI perspective is, again, really simple. You navigate to Applications, Oracle Backup. You select the Oracle instance or the individual databases, and you select and apply an SLA. And again, remember that if your database is not in archive log format, which most Oracle databases in production are, but just an understanding, particularly if you're testing, if your database is not in archive log format, it's not going to show up in the list on Spectrum Protect Plus. The restores for Oracle databases are very similar to SQL Server. There are two database restore types, test and production, and we're going to go over what each one of those mean. Basically, test leaves the database on the vSnap server, production copies the database back. They can be restored to original or alternate Oracle home and original or alternate directory paths for production. And you can rename an Oracle database if you choose to. Spectrum Protect Plus will create clone volumes from the selected snapshot and mount it to the Oracle server using NFS. And if you're using RBAC, it's going to be mounted to all modes. An Oracle Direct NFS is required. If it's not already configured, it will be enabled automatically by the restore job. So some details on the two modes of restoration. First, Oracle Database Restore in test mode. In test mode, a new database instance is going to be created using the original or alternate name specified by the user. A new control file is going to be created to point to the data file image copies under the NSF share. And media recovery is performed to make the database consistent using the archive log backup that you have on the NFS share. And then once you do that, the database is going to be opened in read-write mode. After a successful restore, the job will go into a resource active mode on Spectrum Protect Plus. And then finally, when you cancel it, the test mode database will be shut down and the NSF share will be unmounted. So you can use it until that point. The restored databases will run in no archive log mode. And in the case of RBAC, the database is going to be opened on the first node only, and operation will be skipped on other nodes. For production, the steps are going to be a little bit different. A new database instance is going to be created using the original or alternate name. If you're restoring with the same name and same directory paths, the control file is going to be restored and the data files are restored from the backup using RMAN. If you're restoring with a new name or new directory paths, a new control file is going to be created containing the new DB and new paths. The new paths will point to file system directories, which are created if they don't already exist. If the new paths point to automatic storage management, the specified disk groups must automatically exist if you are using ASM. And the data files are restored from the backup to the specified new paths. Media recovery is performed to make the database consistent using the archived log backups that are present on the NFS share, and then the database is going to be opened in read-write mode. Again, this is production, so when the restore is complete, the NF share is going to be unmounted and there's going to be no resource active in Spectrum Protect Plus. If you are using RBAC, the main restore steps are performed only on the first node, and all other nodes, the instance is started and the database is opened in read-write mode. Okay, and finally, just like in SQL Server, there is a third option for Oracle, the Instant Access Restore. And this option just gives you access to the backup files. So after mounting the clone volume, the job from Spectrum Protect Plus perspective is going to go into a resource active state, and the DBA can manually browse the contents of that NFS share and use whatever RMAN commands he wants on those backups to get to the database files. When canceling, as per usual, the volume, the instant restore in Spectrum Protect Plus, the share is going to be unmounted and the job is going to end. Creating an Oracle database restore in Spectrum Protect Plus, again, is very simple. You navigate to Application Oracle Restore. You're going to pick your database and you're going to pick the recovery point and just move it over to the right hand side. You can choose the destination, original, or alternate location, a new name, or test or production. And we do include the ability to run some pre and post scripts with the restore, so you can do whatever you need to do, for instance data masking, etc. Okay, so that's Oracle. Now let's go back to some additional support for VMware and additional support that was added to Spectrum Protect Plus at version 10.1. We always allowed you to pick virtual machines from a VMs in a folder level, and now we support VMware tagging for picking the virtual machines that are going to be in any particular SLA. You can now use tags as a filter. You go in and apply the tags in vSphere, and then they're automatically picked up by the Spectrum Protect Plus inventory. You can view those in the backup job selection pane by using the tags and categories filter when creating the job definition. So that is how you pick those particular virtual machines for backup. We will restore the VMware tags when you restore a virtual machine if you check that option. And as you can see, that is down there at the bottom on Restore VM Tags. So that just puts the tags back in VMware when you restore the VM. We now support exclusion of VM decays from VMware, and the way you do it is you assign a VM to an SLA policy, and once you do that, the VM will become a clickable link, and you can go out there and select which VM decays you would like to include or exclude from the backup during the backup job. Now, just a little note on including and excluding VMs. VM decay inclusion and exclusion can only be performed when looking at the VMs and templates view. Looking at the data store view, for example, will not allow you to click on the clickable link and select the disk from backup. So make sure that you're in the VMs and templates view when you're selecting those. Another way to exclude certain virtual machines from a backup job is to use exclusion rules. So for instance, you might want to exclude all of the machines that have test-dev in its name when you set up a backup job, and you can do that by just setting up the SLA to exclude virtual machines with a specific name. You use wildcards, you type it in the configuration options of the SLA and then save it when you save the job, and those machines will be automatically excluded. We've added the ability to expire backups from the Spectrum Protect Plus console. The way you do it is you just go to System Catalog Retention, and you'll be able to type in a search pattern and enter some filter details to find the specific backup job name that you are looking for. And then once you do it, you can choose Action Expire to pick to expire the job on the next maintenance job. So what this allows you to do is expire vSnap backups outside of the normal SLA pattern for whatever reasons you may have. Okay, so next let's move on to some additional enhancements in version 10.1.1 to the RBAC, or role-based access control. At version 10.1.1, we do provide additional granularity for organizations to provide very granular access control to the resources of Spectrum Protect Plus, so that administrators, DBAs, etc. can go in and only have access to the resources who they should from a security perspective. There are really three components to RBAC: the users, the who, which defines which users will follow or have access to a role and resources. And then once you pick the user, you can give them a role. So what are the allowed tasks that a user can perform? And the resources are which areas and resources the user can access. So those are the three components of RBAC. We have predefined some built-in roles for you, including application admin, backup only, restore only, sysadmin, self-service, and VM admin. So these are a good start in terms of the roles that are available in the system that should allow you to define users' role with a level of access that they need. If, however, you want to add some additional roles or customize any of those, you can do that. We've also created two resource groups out of the box, including the database all resources and the hypervisor all resources. And here again, this is kind of a typical separation of duties, right? The VMware administrators are typically separate from the DBAs. So you can use those resource groups, or if you want to have more granularity, you can go ahead and create some custom resource groups for your particular users that limit that that further apply more granularity to it. Beginning in version 10.1.1, well, Spectrum Protect has always used a REST API to handle communications between the back end of the product and the graphical user interface, the Spectrum Protect Plus portal. But in version 10.1.1, we have exposed that API so that customers and users can access it and programmatically control Spectrum Protect Plus. And we provided additional documentation for all of the REST API's calls. Now, this is just a standard REST API, so if you've done any kind of REST API programming before, the REST API from Spectrum Protect Plus is really no different. It's just documented and available now. The server is going to respond in JSON format, and then you'll be able to parse that in whatever scripting language you choose to use to programmatically control the product. The documentation is available from the application itself, and it's broken into two parts. There's a REST API guide and a vSnap API guide. So you'll see the documentation broken into those two particular areas. And the doc will include all of the endpoints or URLs and the JSON format that you can expect to receive from all the gets, the puts, the posts, and the deletes. Now, we're not going to really go into any programming here, but you can, of course, this is just a standard REST API call, and you can use any programming language that you really know and like to access Spectrum Protect Plus. Includes Python, JavaScript, PowerShell, Groovy, etc. Some of those I've never used before, like for instance Groovy. I've done some work with the REST API in PowerShell, and I tend to like that. I know a lot of people use Python and JavaScript. So just whatever scripting language you want, you can now control Spectrum Protect Plus with. And then finally, in addition to an on-site, on-premises deployment of Spectrum Protect Plus, we have now added a offering of Spectrum Protect Plus on the IBM cloud. So if you're running your VMware environment on the IBM cloud and want to use Spectrum Protect Plus to protect it, you can do that. So it provides automatic deployment and configuration of Spectrum Protect Plus with no on-premises resources required. This will be available on the 19th of March 2018 on the IBM Cloud for VMware Solutions portal. Now, in terms of licensing Spectrum Protect Cloud, you can do it in two ways. If you have your own license, you can bring it with you and use it on the IBM Cloud from Passport Advantage, or you can also license Spectrum Protect Plus on the VMware Solutions portal. Once you do the deployment of Spectrum Protect Plus, however, you will be responsible in this solution for managing it, upgrading it, etc. So it's just a deploy of the appliance. This is some information about the technical specs that you will get with Spectrum Protect Plus. It's deployed as a pre-sized virtual machine with those specifications on the right-hand side. I won't read them to you. You can read them yourself. But you can configure as much vSnap repository as you want using the IBM Cloud Endurance file storage volumes. So here you see an example of, in this particular deployment, we have two storage volumes with 2,000 gig each for vSnap storage. You can increase that or decrease that depending on your needs. In addition, if you deploy Spectrum Protect Plus and need to add storage to it, you can just go out there and in the cloud add additional vSnap storage to the deployment. And I won't read the instructions to you. It is documented on the IBM Cloud Solution Architecture Guide. Now, just a warning for this particular time. At the time of this recording, when you deploy Spectrum Protect Plus using this service in the IBM Cloud, you are going to get version 10.1.0, patch 1, and you will have to go out there and upgrade it to 10.1.1 to get the functionality that we discussed in this video. We expect to have that upgraded relatively soon, but as of this recording, it is at version 10.1.0. So that's it for 10.1.1. It's quite a lot of functionality. I urge you to go out there and try it, and I would love to have some feedback from you in the comment section of this video.